Today's webinar, which we will be featuring George Spiers, Citrix CTP, and I'll be giving a better introduction here in a few minutes. But today, George, as well as Yemi, Lady Jew, our senior technical consultant here at Goliath, is really going to be talking to you around how you can troubleshoot issues around Citrix is slow, especially for the remote workforce, especially when everyone is working remote. So before we jump in, I do want to go through a few housekeeping items. In terms of agenda and flow, we're going to talk about why some of these challenges exist and how they've changed because of having a very almost solely focused remote workforce. And what does that mean for you as an administrator or an IT manager? And what impact has it had on your team and organization? We're then going to go ahead and give some advice on how you can overcome that. How should you think about monitoring and troubleshooting that end user experience differently now that everyone is remote? And then Yemi's going to walk through an actual demonstration of Goliath and talk about how we've overcome some of these challenges. If you have questions throughout, please put them in the questions box. We will get to them either during or at the end. And one question we always get is will this recording be available? Absolutely. Within 24 hours, you'll have a copy of this recording in your inbox. Now, before I hand it over to George, I did just want to give one slide introduction around Goliath. Goliath offers monitoring and troubleshooting software for end user experience across Citrix as well as VMware Horizon. It doesn't matter where your users are located, your workloads are located. We work in that hybrid IT environment. And if you look at these logos on the slide here, every single one of these organizations will tell you after using Goliath, it had the operational impact of hiring 2 to 3 full-time troubleshooting experts that was available 24/7, 365 days a week. Another key takeaway is you can see that we scale to some of the largest enterprise deployments, as well as helping small and medium-sized businesses because our ease of use and price profile fits for that size as well. And finally, one thing to take note is we absolutely have a stronghold in healthcare. We have a number of health systems on the phone today. That is because we are known as the health IT standard because we have purpose-built modules for all major EHR applications. That includes Epic, Cerner, Allscripts, Meditech. So we not only look across end user behavior as well as the entire delivery IT infrastructure, but also the performance of the EHR application so that when someone says my system is slow, whether it's Citrix or Cerner or Epic, we can isolate that root cause and help you as IT admins resolve it extremely quickly. And in healthcare, we know that it's often a matter of working with a patient, and if they clinician or a doctor does not have a good experience, it's going to negatively impact the healthcare experience. And with the rise of telehealth, it's becoming even more important. So with that, I am going to turn it over to George Spiers. For those that do not know George, he's been a Citrix CTP since 2018. He currently is an architect for an enterprise organization in the UK. He is certified across virtualization, Citrix networking. He's also Microsoft certified solution expert, and he is a very focused in healthcare as well, and is an Epic certified administrator. So I'm extremely happy to have George on the call today. George, why don't you take it from here and talk about some of the challenges that you see and that others in the community are seeing.
Yes, thanks a lot, Stacey, and hello everybody. It's nice to be here again on the invite from Goliath. It's also coming up to that time of year again where my CTP contributions need to be submitted for the renewal process. So this is another good opportunity to contribute back to the community and equally share my experience supporting a remote workforce. And as you can see from this slide, there's many different challenges for IT pros that surround supporting a remote workforce. Because remote working adds even more extra layers of complexity to our investigations and when troubleshooting issues, we may find ourselves more commonly blaming other parts of the infrastructure, like the network, for example, when issues arise. And this is relevant simply because a lot of organizations don't have that visibility into the root cause of performance issues, and this really leads to some guesswork. The other challenge is that whilst our end users are remote, the IT teams are often remote as well. Communication, as you know, It's key when troubleshooting a root cause, but not being next to your colleague to share thoughts and ideas simply makes everything more difficult. And this includes dialogue with management and potential vendors where required as well to keep them in the loop or request additional support. Data and analytics are also key to helping us understand any issues that are going on, but often a lot of the time we actually have lack of data, and then we therefore spend time hopelessly searching in different areas where we hope to find some information useful to troubleshoot a root cause, but we end up finding nothing other than realizing we've actually wasted valuable troubleshooting time. And with remote working, we rely more on the end user feedback, but often the feedback from our end users can be negative for various different reasons. And many times it really does not help you, the IT administrator, in troubleshooting the problem at that time. So this slide here, it really shows the complexity of an environment that runs Citrix, and it also equally highlights why we need that in-depth knowledge to support it. So you have a number of different teams in your environment supporting the infrastructure that's required to publish applications and desktops to your end users. Now, the end user never sees everything that goes on in the background. So they can get a bit frustrated when something's not working right and they don't understand why. From the left-hand side of this slide in particular, here we have end users that are initiating ICA sessions to their virtual apps and desktops. And these end users come from multiple different locations. In today's world, that's mostly from home, across the country or maybe even across the world. And they all use different devices, from home PCs, maybe they have corporate laptops or personal mobile devices. And much of the time, IT find it difficult to manage and monitor these endpoints, especially when they're remote, and also especially when the endpoint is a personal device. They could be running low RAM or CPU or running an old operating system. And what this does, it presents opportunity for help desk tickets to be logged due to slowness within applications when working remotely, slow logons, or things like general access issues. But it doesn't necessarily mean that something is wrong with the Citrix environment. And as we move to the right of this slide into the data center, we have the core Citrix components, so things like your Citrix gateway, your storefront servers, delivery controllers, and obviously your desktops and applications. There's many different components here, and they all need to be maintained 24/7. And then we can move on to the back-end systems, things like your profile servers, Active Directory, DNS, SQL, licensing servers. And I haven't even mentioned yet that these components could be on-premise, they could be fully in the cloud, like Azure or Citrix Cloud, or there could be a hybrid mixture. And this obviously presents a whole new amount of complexity to the environments. So just by looking at this slide alone, it's clear to see how many different components are needed to make the Citrix environment work and how much complexity that introduces. Then we have our demand for Citrix expertise versus the actual pool of experts that are available in the market today. So in my experience, an organization that runs virtual apps and desktops, they generally need 2 or maybe even 3 Citrix experts full-time to support it. And keep in mind also that this isn't different from other technologies used at scale. So think of your Microsoft Exchange or Active Directory or SCCM. They all have dedicated teams of people, and it's generally more than just one person. So this is no different when it comes to Citrix. However, the supply of Citrix experts is often low, and this means the expertise for that Citrix expert is in demand. Yet, a lot of the time, Citrix experts actually spend 25 to 30% or even more of their time troubleshooting basic end user tickets. This is what I call firefighting, and this really takes away their ability to make a difference by using their real expertise within an environment. And if we take a moment to think about how the world works right now due to the pandemic, it's mostly done remotely. And I wanted to call out a few challenges that has cropped up with everyone now working remotely. Firstly, there's a higher demand for video and VoIP software. That communication importance that I talked about in an earlier slide, that needs to be maintained. Organizations are turning to applications like Teams from Microsoft or Zoom to stay connected with their colleagues. End users are also now working different patterns, different shift patterns. Maybe they log on at night because it's easy. They're at home, they're almost effectively in the office without having to leave their house. And they also use different applications through Citrix that maybe they didn't use when in the office. So for example, maybe there's an increase in web browsing within Citrix, maybe an increase in Google Chrome usage, and this can impact server performance. Also, as we all know, user connections from home are not visible or controlled by our IT team, and they can impact a user's experience with their virtual apps or desktops. Likewise, personal devices, as I previously mentioned, are being used a lot when working remotely. And these could be old devices that are overloaded with software, such as maybe there's a lot of browser plugins installed on the end user's PC, or it's simply running on old hardware that hasn't been updated in multiple years. And all of these different factors can cause an end user to have a bad experience with Citrix when working remote. But often the end user will blame Citrix and not realize that it's actually because of their own device or their Wi-Fi quality. And lastly, there's a challenge to provide that same productivity when users get inside the office, outside of it. So sometimes we have staff that need to use certain software, and they must use that software with peripheral devices, such as say a microphone or a foot pedal. And supporting these peripherals devices on personal devices and getting them to work effectively over remote Citrix connections is very difficult. Often you have to install certain drivers or software on the end user's PC, but again, you don't control the end user's PC, so this is a real a challenge for IT administrators today as well. So now I'll just take a moment to look at a typical day for a Citrix administrator like myself, where we will support our remote workers. And in the new world of remote working, I wanted to share some tips and advice that will help workers achieve an acceptable or even a great user experience with their virtual apps and desktops. So most, if not all, of the virtual apps and desktops deployments out there today will be secured by a front-end Citrix gateway, and that's what your end users use for remote access to their virtual apps and desktops. So to be able to track things like the end user's WAN latency or the data center latency or the overall ICA response time, ICA RTT, you should deploy a solution such as Citrix ADM into your environment. And this appliance can not only manage your NetScaler gateway, but it can also capture and display latency metrics to you. And that can help when users call in to report that their Citrix is slow and you don't really know if it's a user issue or it's an issue within the data center. But keep in mind that for historical data, you need to have a premium virtual apps and desktops license. So if you don't have that, you'll basically get real-time data rather than something that you can historically look back on. But there are third-party solutions that can capture these latency metrics as well. So it's not just about Citrix ADM. There is other solutions that can do the same thing if you don't have a premium license. You want to also monitor browser activity, and you want to limit browser access to websites that are actually required for business activities. As I mentioned before, web browsing within your Citrix environment will probably increase. It could increase a lot. So you want to be limiting what people can do with that web browser. You don't want them to log on to YouTube and watch videos or whatever, because this could really hog or use a lot of CPU and RAM on a desktop, on a Citrix desktop. And this would impact our remote workers. So you really need to control that web browsing to make sure that other users aren't impacted from being productive. You also want to make sure the internal network is operating as expected. So you'll likely have a dedicated network team with all the different monitoring solutions that they use to monitor the network internally within your data center. You can do other things, some best practices, such as binding the NSTCP default XA XD profile to your gateway virtual servers. And this is really for a mixture of best performance. And there's other things you can do as well, such as making use of the WAN, Wide Area Network, Citrix policy templates that are in Citrix Studio. These provide a number of latency-friendly policy options. So if you want to create policies for your end users, you can start off with this template. And then if you need to tweak certain settings, then you can obviously do that as required as well. And you also want to deploy things. There's technologies such as adaptive transport, and this basically sends ICA traffic over UDP rather than TCP. This is also known as EDT. And this is more friendly for remote connections than TCP would be, so certainly look at that as well. But to support our remote workers even more, there's obviously additional options that we can look towards. We can look at leveraging purpose-built tools for Citrix environments, tools that provide intelligence and automation to monitor and troubleshoot the end user experience. So there's some things a valuable tool must be able to offer. They must be able to anticipate issues before they happen by testing the entire infrastructure before end users log on and also at various points of the day. So a solution that's able to launch an application or a desktop just like an end user would, and provide feedback to the IT pros that that is working, or if it's not, provide some screenshots or data to explain why, what has actually failed in the process of launching an app or desktop. The solution must also help troubleshoot issues, and this can be done by providing deep and also broad metrics to the Citrix administrator. And this will reduce the Citrix administrator's time that they have to spend wondering where the problem lies. So that's really that proof where of a problem lies. It's the data that a lot of organizations do not have today that helps you find root cause much faster. And finally, the solution must also be able to document the root cause. And this is so that you can work towards a permanent fix and also be able to show to management that you've worked on this permanent fix. Or like they is with other teams, maybe your Active Directory team need to be involved, or networking team, or maybe even the vendors such as Citrix, so they can work alongside you if the problem, for example, is not caused by Citrix itself. So Stacey, would you like to take us forward and then explain us in a little more detail, please?
Thank you, George. That was a great lead in, and I think before we jump into the technology, I wanted to articulate how purpose-built solutions can help with the remote workforce with a client success story. So Penn National Insurance, they actually came to Goliath even before the pandemic. They had a virtual workspace initiative because they were looking to expand their remote working program. But one of the challenges, and it was really holding up a formal rollout, was Cisco soft phones kept dropping for their at-home users. And in fact, it got so bad, and the IT team there was having such a hard time identifying root cause that management was ready to put the whole project on the shelf and say, I just don't think this is going to work. We're going to need to keep people in the offices. What they were able to do, though, is gain visibility by putting in Goliath. Here, they were able to really identify by looking at session performance information that it had nothing to do with the Citrix infrastructure. They were also using iGel. It had nothing to do with iGel. It wasn't their back-end systems. Instead, it was end user behavior. And it was behavior based on the network. And so what they were able to do is actually call some of these remote users and say, your ICA latency speed looked great all morning, but in the afternoon, we start to see a drop in bandwidth. What happens around 2:30, 3 o'clock? Well, regularly users started to say, well, my kids come home from school. They get on the Wi-Fi. They start streaming video games. They start streaming other movies that they're watching. And what happened is while they had great internet connection and paying top dollar for their ISP, they didn't have enough bandwidth actually allocated to their Citrix session to allow for multiple users streaming and doing these activities, plus running their Cisco softphone calls. And so by gaining that visibility, they were able to go ahead and adjust the issue and move past and have a successful rollout. In fact, we've checked back in with them, and it's absolutely critical that they were able to do this in late 2019, because as we all know, everyone went home to work in 2020. Yemi, do you want to talk through the technology a bit more and show not only how we were able to help Penn National, but how we really help organizations, as George talked about, anticipate issues so that we can prevent them from impacting end users, isolate root cause like Penn National, and then also document?
Absolutely. So let's jump right into the technology. And before we do that, I just wanted to set a little bit of a stage for one of the proactive portions of the technology. And as George mentioned, this is the portion that will allow IT to be alerted to issues that impact users' ability to access their desktops or applications when they come in and start their workday. So it's sort of an early warning system that is built into the technology with embedded intelligence, so that you get an alert if there's issues. And then, of course, you have the ability to see screenshots and document sort of what exactly is taking place. So you not only get a head start, but of course, you have an idea as to why those issues are taking place. And before we talk about that, I think the slide I'm presenting here is the sort of deployment architecture for this technology. And as you can see, there is a central Goliath sort of console or server that's spun up or it's deployed inside of the company data center. And then you have these remote launchers or application launchers that are typically deployed on a laptop or a virtual machine at each of the different sites that users are typically located. Now, of course, in this sort of climate, a lot of our customers will deploy these application launchers not only at their specific office locations where or within the data center to test sort of internal and external connections, but they also would deploy the technology in AWS or Azure in different regions or availability zones. So it allows you to understand whether or not issues are going to be impacting remote users, as of course they're spread across different regions in the country or all around the world. So to give you some sort of a view of what this technology looks like, I'm going to jump right in to the application availability analysis tab. So in this environment, you have your different launches taking place from different locations. It's going through each of the steps that the user is doing, that the user would take to launch an application or a desktop. So it's almost like you have an admin at that location or in the cloud launching desktops every 15 or 20 minutes. So this view is now going to give you a live sort of dashboard view of all of those launches taking place across your entire environment. And this page is broken down into two sections. We have the top section, which is a high-level dashboard of all of the launches taking place, right? So the blue bars will represent the launch times, and the trend line here is going to represent overall availability. So out of 100%, how available are your applications and desktops that you're launching leveraging this technology from, of course, all of your different locations. And you can see here at the top, you can filter based on date range. You can filter based on the locations that you're launching these applications and desktops from. You can even, of course, filter based on the applications and desktops that you're testing. So this is a quick and easy way to sort of send a snapshot or a screenshot over to management to say, okay, this is what availability has looked like over the last week or 2 weeks, depending on, what information is pertinent there. Now, the bottom section, this is where you would go if you've gotten an alert from the technology saying that there's a failure, there's some sort of issue with an application launch or a desktop launch, and users may not have access to the environment. So now on the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see the date and time of the launches. You can see what application or desktop was being launched, where it was being launched from, and ultimately whether that launch was successful or if it failed. And if it did fail, you actually have the ability to see at what stage of the process it failed. So you can see it failed at the enumeration stage, at the launch stage. And with that, you can actually click down on the magnifying glass icon here on the left-hand side of the screen, and you now get screenshots of each stage of the process. So effectively, as an IT admin, if I've gotten an alert, I can see exactly what would potentially present to users in the case that they came across this error. So I'm not only getting that early warning system, I'm also sort of taking myself out of the business of relying on users to not only report these, but to replicate or to tell me exactly what error message showed up or what issues they were running into. And I have sort of evidence here for that right in front of the screen. So in this case, you can see this application failed at the, or this launch here failed at the enumeration stage, meaning that this resource was not presenting on the storefront page. I can click here, I can see the screenshot evidence that, okay, it's not presenting on the storefront for these users' credentials. Of course, this could be, let's say, an issue with maybe a delivery controller going down and it's leveraging localhost cache, or it could be a simple Citrix misconfiguration issue where applications or users weren't added to the correct delivery groups. However, the net of this is that the user would not have access to the application if they ran into this issue, but because this technology is launching applications on a scheduled basis, it allows you to get ahead of that before users are impacted. Another sort of proactive portion of the technology, and this is really going to focus on embedded intelligence and automation, is our automatic discovery and dependency map view for Citrix. And as sort of the name implies, this will automatically discover all of those components that are helping to deliver Citrix in your environment. It's then going to map them out and apply over 250 monitoring rules to the environment. It's going to be monitoring for conditions, failure points, thresholds, events that can actually cause end user experience issues. These monitoring rules then drive the heat map structure that's present on the screen. So as issues start to take place on any of these individual components that are going to impact Citrix, these components will then turn red or orange depending on the severity. And then you can click on these components, and on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see resource utilization, context-specific health checks based on the role of the component in the delivery infrastructure. Of course, you will see any alerts that are sort of driving the heat map or driving the displays here. So you have a one-stop sort of knock view at a high level as to everything that impacts this user or users in your environment. You can click on a delivery controller and you can see if you're having connection failures. And if you are having connection failures, the alerts will tell you exactly why you're having those sort of issues, so on and so forth. But you can also drill down here into the delivery layer where you can now get a logical breakdown of the environment, where you're able to see your delivery controllers map back sort of logically to your the delivery groups, to your machine catalogs, even down to the gold images. And as you click on a particular delivery group, what you'll now get is a built-out machine infrastructure view that shows you performance of your entire delivery group, as you can see here on the right-hand side of the screen, resource utilization, average end user experience metrics for the delivery group, average network latency and connection speed metrics for the delivery group. And you can drive all of those back down to the machine catalog, to the hypervisor cluster, down to the individual hypervisor hosts that are supporting this particular delivery group. So in the case where you have, let's say, a specific host or 2 or 3 hosts that maybe backups are taking place on, that could be driving poor performance from a round trip time perspective for users that are on virtual machines that are being supported by those hosts, you will be able to see exactly when those issues took place. You see exactly how they're impacting those users. So that way you can sort of foster those conversations with the storage team or with the infrastructure team and say, hey, these specific hosts are the bottlenecks for performance in our environment. And you can see that because storage latency is high, and that's actually negatively impacting all of the users' round trip times on those screens, or all the users' round trip times that are being supported by those hosts. So effectively, you not only get a knock view, right, alerting you to issues taking place, but you also get a very effective troubleshooting stop because of the ability to tie back the infrastructure to user experience at a higher level. Another thing that a lot of our customers find valuable on this automatic discovery and dependency map view is, if you look here at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you can see the receiver version or workspace app versions that are available in your environment. So if you come over here and you see users connecting in with, receiver 11, right? Version 11, okay, that isn't really supported and we need to get these users to upgrade, and gives you an understanding of the upgrade process, whether you are whether IT is involved in upgrading endpoints or not. So with that, this gives you sort of a macro view, an architect's view, as marketing will call it, of sort of what is impacting users from leveraging embedded intelligence and automation. So now, where do you go when an individual user is actually having a problem? Similar to the Penn National story that Stacy broke down. User is calling in, complaining about slowness. Where do I go to troubleshoot? Well, with that, our customers will head over to this view, which is the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Session Display. And this is where all of the sessions in the environment will populate. And this view is, it's live updating, so it gives you sort of an understanding of all of your user sessions. You have the ability to go back and take a look at historic sessions as well. One thing that's important for me to point out is that we do not average or roll up any information we collect inside of the technology. So you have the ability to see sessions from 2 months ago or 3 months ago with the same amount of granularity as you would from a session from today or an active session, which gives you the ability to go back and see historically what has changed in the environment that may have been causing an issue today that maybe wasn't causing an issue in the past. So what you can do is you can pull back historic sessions, you can sort or filter by any one of these tabs here. So if I wanted to get rid of, let's say, specific receiver versions, if I wanted to look at a specific delivery group, I have the ability to sort of configure and sort, or filter using this screen. I also have a quick search or quick filter here that allows me to search for anything in text on the screen. So you can pull back all of those sessions, and of course, in environments, you can imagine if you're going back months and months at a time, it's going to be a lot of sessions. But you have quick and easy ways to be able to filter and find the sessions that you're looking for, so that you're then able to drill down into the sessions to figure out exactly why slowness or issues were taking place for that particular user session. So as I did here, I clicked on the session, and now I get a pop-up of about 7 or 8 tabs, depending on what's actually configured in the environment. And this is going to break down everything that went into this user's performance, everything from their logon performance to the ICA connection to the performance of the VM that was supporting this user, down to the hypervisor host, the applications and processes that were running on the machine, even down to any events or alerts or even the event logs on that machine itself. And it's put out in a way that allows you to traverse the user session logically, so that by the time you've come up with an answer, you've gone through the different tabs, you can emerge with an answer as to why slowness or issues are taking place. But then we have this summary tab. And this summary tab is really designed to give you an ability to come up with those answers quickly without even having to drill into some of those other tabs. So this is heavily used by service desk to come up with the quick answer. Is a user having a problem? Take a look at these metrics, okay, and then escalate the ticket. And then, of course, the level 2 or level 3 have the ability to drill in granularly into some of those additional pieces as needed. So if we walk through sort of a workflow, particularly if we take, for instance, Penn National, when a user is calling in complaining about slowness, the first thing that that the admin would do is take a look at their round trip time. Of course, we're all familiar with round trip time. It's pretty much the best way to depict whether or not a user is or isn't having a problem within their session. So when they take a look at round trip time here, like for instance, there's a spike here in round trip time. The next thing you want to do is understand, okay, if they are having a problem, why are they having a problem? Is it due to something in the data center? So a resource utilization issue, or is it something with the network? So how you get to that answer is by looking here at the network latency. And this is real-time network latency, not typical ping or ICMP-based network latency. It's network latency that's gotten from the ICA protocol itself. So this is essentially going to tell you how much of the round trip time is being impacted by the network. So in the case of Penn National, they would look at network latency and see that spikes around the same time as round trip time. So it tells us that it's a network problem. And then with that, we can then look at connection speed here at the bottom of the screen. And this is the amount of bandwidth, essentially the download speed of the user at their location while accessing Citrix. So in this case, they would be able to see, and similar to this particular session here, you can see that this user had about 14 megabits per second connection speed to start the session, but slowly start to drop down to about 2 megabits per second, which really isn't good enough to support a Citrix session. And you can see that that sort of drop aligns with this spike here in round trip time. So when you're having a conversation with the user, you can say, hey, I noticed that your connection speed dropped at a particular time. What is going on? And similar to Penn National, a kid's getting on the network, or you know, are you far away from your router, right? Accessing the environment from a roof deck, and then of course, you know, the routers in the basement, right? Those sort of things could impact the user. And then from there, if it's not a connection speed or a network problem, you can take a look at the VM resources. Take a look at maybe drilling into the ICA connection to see what the user was doing in their session, right? So we have the round trip time and ICA performance here on this top chart, connection speed and bandwidth here on this top right-hand side chart. But I'll focus here on this bottom chart because this gives you the ability to drill into user session to figure out what type of bandwidth is being used in their session and how much of it is being used as well. So you can see here the different types of bandwidth used in this session. Thin wire bandwidth, that's a Citrix display adapter, showing us that, you know, at this particular point, this user was doing something graphically intensive inside of the session. There's input clipboard bandwidth, so user was copying something from their local machine into their VDI. And you can see here, I like to show this because this breaks it down even further. You can see all of the different bandwidth types that we can report on. So USB traffic, printer traffic, audio input and output, as people are leveraging things like Teams or GoToMeeting inside of their sessions now. So you can understand, number one, if some of these activities are impacting the user sessions negatively. And secondly, you can use this to sort of document and understand what type of sessions you would need to support moving forward. Of course, you have the VDI tab, shows you resources for the time frame of the session. Same thing for the host tab, down to the processes running on those machines. And of course, any application or system error or warning events that have taken place on that machine during the time frame of the session. So you can tie it back, you can tie any of these errors or issues back to maybe resource utilization problems that ultimately gave or impacted the round trip time negatively. So there, as you can see, there's a lot of data that we pull, you know, not only from the infrastructure, but of course, you know, when it comes to the user sessions, their activity and their performance, so on and so forth. As we talked about earlier, it is very important to sort of document exactly, you know, how or to document this sort of information historically so that you can, number one, make sure that permanent fix actions can be taken to sort of improve the environment and improve user experience. And number two, even to show management, hey, this is what we've been able to improve in the environment. Here's sort of historically performance, and here are the improvements. So, you know, with data, we can export the data from our technology. We can share the data, you know, with different team members, different tools. We can integrate the data with third-party tools, so you can get sort of alerts and tickets created based on the technology or the data that's available in the technology. So When we talk about exporting and sharing the data, it's also important. It's important for us to break down, or to talk about sort of the reporting that is available. And as you can see here, we have a number of different reports focused on different sections, of course, that allow you to break down and document these sort of things historically and moving forward. So we have end user performance reports, and you can see your end user experience, log on, latency, so on and so forth. Activity reports that break down productivity and peak usage, so we can give IT an understanding of what needs to be supported and whether or not users are accessing the environment. And then, of course, we have system performance reports that allow you to understand the performance of those underlying resources that are contributing or driving performance and user experience in your environment. So I'm going to run through a couple of these very quickly. The first one here is an end user experience report that breaks down overall connection, overall logon times, and ICA performance. So it tells you whether or not users are experiencing issues, whether it's within their logon or within their session itself. The next one here is a pretty interesting one, the end user productivity report. And this is an out-of-the-box report that breaks down the users here on the left-hand side of the screen. It's also going to break down how they're connecting into the environment. But what you can see here is the duration of their session, how long they were actually interacting with the environment, so how long ICA traffic was sort of being leveraged inside of the session. Conversely, their inactivity time and their percentage of interaction. So this helps, especially during this remote workspace, remote workforce time period that we're in, allows IT to understand who's been accessing the environment and how active they are in their sessions. These are typically sent out to business line managers, but also this gives you insight into how performance or performance issues with user experience can actually impact user productivity. So a lot of our customers leverage this not only from a sort of big brother perspective, but just to understand how performance is negatively impacting the productivity of users in the environment. And then, of course, some of these exported reports or some of the data can be enhanced leveraging other tools like Power BI or Tableau. And we have different views into those sort of technologies so that you can create and customize reports to make sure that they fit your business needs. So with that, I'll pass it over to Stacy to help us wrap up.
Great, thank you, Yemi. And please do keep the questions coming. I've seen a few come in, whether they be for Yemi and Goliath or even George and some of his experiences. But one question that does typically come up is, how long does it take to get up and running? At Goliath, we can get customers up and running and using the software in less than 2 hours. We have a white glove implementation service that will help you get everything installed. Then you can work with one of our technical consultants like Yemi to ensure that all of the out-of-the-box reports, alerts, all that embedded intelligence is automatically set up for you. And that's one of the key points. Yemi talked about it. He showed how we can automatically discover your entire Citrix infrastructure. We identify what IT elements, conditions, and failure points that we should be monitoring and alerting on. This is what allows you to not only get up and running quickly, but to make sure that you're having an immediate impact in your organization. So with that, I am going to turn it over. Let's go ahead and get some questions. So one of the first questions comes from Scott. Is there an agent installed on session host and delivery controllers, etc.? Is the product licensed by host agent or user count? Yemi, you want to take that one?
Sure. So there is a lightweight intelligent agent that is deployed on session hosts in the environment. So it will be deployed on your XenApp servers or your Windows 10 machines. There's also agents deployed in the delivery infrastructure, so your delivery controllers, storefronts, and things like that. But it's a lightweight intelligent agent. I think it uses about 0.1% of a CPU core. It's about 1.5 meg in size. It takes up 20, 30 megabytes of RAM. So it's really lightweight, doesn't require a reboot. but it really allows us to integrate not only with Windows, but Citrix on that machine to be able to get those deep metrics like the connection speed of the user that's logging in remotely to that particular session host. And the product is licensed based on element monitored. So hopefully that answers that question.
Great. Some questions / comments from Terry. I'll synthesize, but he says, after looking with, working with Citrix directly, this looks extremely promising and something that he could work with with some of the clients that he assists. In there is a question in terms of how do we differentiate from Control Op, Logon BSI, even Citrix Director?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a very good question. I think the major differentiating factors is when it comes to sort of the detail that we have in our technology. These are all very good tools, of course, but the customers that have chosen us, or have sort of or have traded out those technologies for ours would be because of the amount of data that we provide when it comes to troubleshooting, and specifically being able to get to root cause quickly, and the historical retention of our technology as well, being able to pull up sessions historically to view exactly what has impacted the user over a period of time. Also, we have different views that are very specific to allowing you to be able to understand your environment as well. So the automatic discovery and dependency map view that automatically maps out your environment, applies those rules, so you in a glance can be able to see issues impacting the environment. There are a couple of other things as well, but I think those are sort of the major things. They're all very good technologies. As you can imagine, there's going to be a lot of overlap, but those are some of the points that our customers point to as sort of why they would pick our technology over some of the other tools. Of course, screenshot evidence and historical data there.
Great. And Terry, absolutely, we'll follow up with you, as well as some of the sponsorships around CUGC, as we have done that before. Next question comes from Nathan, and he's asking first, George, what are some of the logon metrics that you find helpful for slow logons? And then he was also hoping, Yemi, you could talk through what additional details do we potentially provide at Goliath around logon times?
Yeah, the ones I would find certainly most important, or certainly the ones that you would see, recurring factors that would cause slow logons would be profile load. Obviously, a lot of customers would use Citrix profile management, but there's more and more customers that are adopting other solutions, like FS Logics and containerized solutions. So profile load is definitely important. Obviously, the group policy processing time is another high valuable metric to look at, and it's one of those ones again that is one of the popular reasons why the Citrix logons are slow. So those would be two of the main ones. Then probably closely followed by logon script processing. So a lot of environments will have some form of logon script configured, or maybe multiple, and whether they are actually used or not is a different story. So yeah, those would be the three that I would be looking at first, and probably the three that are most common to cause slow logons within a Citrix environment.
Yeah, and George, that's very, very I think that's spot on, right? When we deploy our technology in customer environments and they're looking for specific metrics for logon duration, those are some of the things that very often result in issues with logon problems. I actually have a slide here that breaks down what actually our technology will show. It will break down the user sessions, it will break down the individual sections of the logon process. As you can see here, you can even break open different sections as well. So with group policies, you can see exactly what policies are affecting this user session and how long each one took to execute. So if you're having issues with GPOs in your environment, this will break it all down for you so you can focus on the group policies that are driving poor performance, rather than going through your different tools and consoles to be able to find that. We also have deep integration into Citrix. It breaks down their profile times. You have the ability to understand if there are delays based on the timeline that you see here, delays between when sessions are being brokered and when the machine takes over and starts to get the user on that machine. So a lot of detail is going to show up here, like their profile loads, their interactive session time. So you can sort of pinpoint exactly what to troubleshoot and give you those details, so you can sort of solve them quickly without having to spend your time looking for where those issues are taking place.
Great. Another one from Scott. Can you monitor inside the HDX protocol?
So inside of the HDX protocol, I think that's something that our customers will leverage our ICA channel usage breakdown, because what you now get is the different types of bandwidth that were being used, whether that's sort of frame hawk, or as I mentioned, thin wire, audio bandwidth, whether that's flash bandwidth, any one of those particular bandwidth types that are being leveraged inside of the session, you'll be able to see them and see how much bandwidth is being used inside of those particular sessions. Now, for instance, if you have a session where the user is not supposed to have, let's say, audio bandwidth, and you see that, then you have an idea of, okay, that might be causing an issue. Maybe we want to take a look at that. So on top of those sort of visuals or the views into those different ICA channels that are impacting the sessions, you also have the ability to take a look at what processes and applications are running as well. So you can then maybe tie back those sort of views, or that information from the sessions, from the ICA sessions, into infrastructure views, and to see if there are some sort of issues there or correlations that could be driving poor performance for the user. So you're taking a look at things from both a connection or Citrix specific perspective, as well as a Windows perspective as well. And it's all for the time frame of the session in a single view, as we showed in the demonstration.
Perfect. Thanks, Yemi. Another question, Yemi, is can we use Goliath at dark side network? I mean, a network that doesn't have internet connection, all of remote locations connected with MPLS network.
Absolutely. Our technology can be completely on premises, completely shut out from the internet. That's how a lot of our customers leverage our technology, or a lot of our government agency customers will leverage it that way, and without any issues at all.
Great. Another one is, can Goliath help identify high CPU ready and potential CPU overcommitment? If so, are these flagged and alerted in real time?
Absolutely. Those are some of our out-of-the-box monitoring rules that we are starting to look for in your environment as soon as you deploy the technology. And we talked about that on our automatic discovery and dependency map view, where you're able to show CPU ready on your individual hypervisor host. And I'll flip back over to the technology here. So you'll be able to see CPU ready on the hypervisor cluster and the host, and show you exactly how that's negatively impacting users or not. And then in the session display for user session as well, you'll be able to see CPU ready for the hypervisor host for that session that was being supported by the VM that was on that hypervisor host. And it's all aligned to the time frame that the user was on that session host. So if you saw round trip time issues showing that the user was having a problem in their session, and that correlates with high CPU ready on the hypervisor host, that tells you that it's a hypervisor host issue, and maybe not something that's specific to that VM. You also have a hypervisor host tab that allows you to not only see those metrics, but you can see any other VMs that are being supported by that host and their resource utilization as well. So effectively, you know if you're having host level issues that are impacting not just this particular VM, but any other VM that's in your environment.
Great, Yemi, thank you. A question from someone in the healthcare space. For your EHR modules, what type of performance data are you getting? Is it usage within the system or logon times?
So for the EHR applications, you know, if you're delivering, let's say Epic via Citrix or VMware Horizon, you'll be able to get all of the details that we just went over today. But what you'll also get in an Epic environment is we have API, we have a technical partnership with Epic that allows us to pull into the technology Epic System Pulse data. So System Pulse is the sort of performance monitoring database for the Epic application itself. So in a single technology, you're able to view not only the performance of the delivery of Epic, but also the performance of the application. So a lot of times when there's an influx of tickets or something like that, the admins are able to understand if it is a Citrix or delivery infrastructure, delivery method issue, or if it's something with the application. That way you can, either open up tickets or go in and get specific data as to why that performance is taking place. In a Cerner environment, we're the only ones that we're the only technology that is deployed in Cerner's remote hosted data center in Kansas City. So we'll be able to get that end-to-end visibility for performance of the sessions that are taking place, in that in the Cerner data center, from the Cerner data center. And actually, Cerner resells our technology as well. So if you are a Cerner customer, you can definitely reach out and we can talk about how we can get that deployed for you. And then, of course, we have different views into Metatech and Allscripts as well. So you can understand, again, the performance of the application as well as the delivery method of that application.
Great. And one last question, unless there's others, please do feel free to submit some additional ones. And Yemi, you kind of hinted at this, but where's the data coming from that you collect? Do I need to get an agent on every single machine?
That's a good question. So we do not have to put agents on every single machine. The only places that we would we have to put technology to get the information that we have here is going to be inside of your data center. So those will be your delivery controllers, and then the machines or the delivery controller storefronts, those sort of infrastructure components, and then those machines that are hosting sessions. So if you're a VDI environment, it will be those Windows 10 desktops. And if you're sort of a virtual apps and shared desktop environment, it will be your Windows Server machines. We do not have to put information or technology on the endpoint machines, across the United States or across the world. We don't have to put any technology there. All of the data we collect is going to be from within the data center, but we have deep integration into Citrix and its protocols to be able to get the connection speed and the network latency metrics that are really valuable and sort of needed for troubleshooting issues.
Well, great. One more. We use NetApp for NFS and CIFS. Is there an agent required on that array?
No, there's no agent that's required on the sort of hypervisor level. We actually leverage agentless technology for that. So it's going to be agentless technology, API integrations into the major hypervisor platforms.
All right. Well, I want to thank George again for joining us during this session. And also, if anyone is interested in either seeing a demo specific to your environment, have additional questions, or are looking for a free trial, do not hesitate to reach out to techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com and we'll be in touch shortly. As we said, this recording will be in your inbox, and so please keep an eye out for it. Thank you, and I hope everyone has a great day.